GM, GA, GE, wherever you may be. We took a week off basically since the last time we chatted, but today a lot has happened in the world of NFTs since the last time, last Thursday, and it's basically Goblin season all over again. So we'll talk about that today and everything else going on. Welcome, Tyler. So obviously, last time we chatted was Thursday. We took Monday off with the holiday there. How has your week been? Have you been sort of touching grass like I did this past weekend, or have you been deep into NFTs still?
Lou, I almost wore my GD hat on the stream today. It's GD from the Cameo Pass project. It stands for Good Day. But this week, to me, it stands for God damn it, because that's how I feel every time I look at the rankings and trending board on each day. With everything that's trending, it's just derivatives. It's been a mess.
Yeah, it's been kind of wild, and it's almost as if like we've been trading sideways, and it was a distraction in a way, is how I've been sort of looking at it, where, okay, we have Goblins came out, they made headlines, then people started going with free mints. There's just free mints every hour, multiple mints an hour. And that's sort of what the last 5 days or so have been of trading, as these projects that were coming out with high mint counts weren't selling out. Now you come out, and if you have a low cost to mint, people can go in, mint a bunch, and be able to sort of sell those projects out, and then the market's deciding what the real cost is for it. And I almost feel like that's better. Like, there's way less money going to the creators of the project, but it's also creating more of a fair price than when you're all these Dutch auctions where the big one over this past week was Tiger Bob, probably, that had a lot of FUD surrounded around it. But what's your thoughts on just sort of the free mints and what we've been at here? Let me pull up this past 24 hours, and it's pretty wild to look at this stat. The top 10 by number of trades, basically anything to do with goblins or fake goblins, I guess you'd call it, like derivatives that just say WTF and are some other sort of thing. You have zombies, elves, and then the other one in there, boring one. That's the only one that's not like connected to the original and trying to break off from Goblintown, WTF.
Yeah, when I looked at this list today, it's what really set me off right before the show. Number 1, Goblin Piss. Number 2, Goblin Burgers. Number 4, piece of shit. What WTF? Like, but it's a good sign of the times and kind of where we're at right now. And certainly, I'm not ready to give up on free meta. I still like the potential of this trend, but this is not what we had in mind when we were thinking about new products coming in with free mints to prove themselves, right? I think in the best case scenario, it's products that have real teams behind them, real vision, real goals, and their own style, and are not just making cheap knockoffs of existing hyped projects like Goblins. Yeah. So the derivatives certainly has been disappointing. We've seen this before, though, right? Like, we were talking before the show, Toads and Toads derivatives were all over the place, 6-8 months ago. Then MFers had a similar run. MFers got popular, and then there was a ton of MFer derivatives. So this isn't anything new. I hope that the free mint meta doesn't get dragged down too much from the derivative or distraction meta, or whatever you want to call the term, because I still think that that mechanic is good. And we're seeing how the market's responding to paid mints right now, and it is not good. Anything with a price tag above 0.1 requires a ton of demand to even sell out right now, with one of the biggest names in NFTs with AJV, Gary V's brother, not selling out 10% of his collection this week.
Yeah.
So I'm not ready to give up on the free mints just yet.
Yeah, and when you're just describing that, like maybe this is just part of the cycle. Every 4 months, this is part of it. I think it's a way of keeping people sort of trading sideways ahead of there's NFT NYC in now almost 3 weeks or so from now. I think a lot of projects that are more legitimate are going to be there and announcing plans and just what they've been working on recently. So this is kind of filling that gap right now and keeping people active and not like forgetting about NFTs and sort of the discourse I've been in talking about this. It's somewhat of a PvP meta right now, and it's not necessarily the best thing for NFTs because basically the game plan right now, and this is how I've been going about it and how people have been able to win in this sort of meta, is you find one of these free to mint. If it could be like 0.002 a pop to mint, but you basically mass mint it. You mint at least 10 of them. Like let's say you mint 10 for a total cost of 0.02 with like gas fees. Then you're just listing them at 0.02. If it gets up to 0.05 even, you've just made massive gains, and it's creating this sort of pressure. And Goblins came out of it ahead, where they rose to over 80th yesterday. They're sitting around 6.5 now, and it's basically nothing else has gotten to 1 ETH in this. Goblin Girls ran up overnight to around 0.9. That's probably the closest we've seen to it. There was that Elf Town got up to like 0.2. But if you did that method that I had just described and sold, say you had all 10 of those, you made an ETH off of that. So some of these you're able to mint, and if you mint in bulk and they get over 0.1 ETH, you've just made multiple ETH. So there's still a lot of upside in these with more limited downside. So I think that's why people are going for it. It's going back to sort of the casino idea. But I'm not sure how long it's going to last. Like there's a diminishing returns is how we've been describing it. And it's almost like something new is going to have to pop up. I will mention Goblintown tomorrow. They announced they're going to be doing an airdrop of burgers. And what do you think is going to happen there? Because personal thought is that's when this is all going to crash, because airdrops generally are baked in to some degree. And I think once people get those airdrops, the goblin price will drop, and then it'll move sort of towards those burgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a likely scenario, right? And I think the price action right ahead of that airdrop is going to be important to see. Like right now, it was surging yesterday. I thought it was going to touch 10. I think it got to near 9 at ultimate Pico top. Now it's back to 6.3. It's been incredibly volatile, but if it stays on a downtrend ahead of the airdrop, then that's a bad sign, and it probably is going to crash back to below 4.3. And I don't think goblins go straight to 0. I think they're going to be around for a while.
Yeah.
I think they made too big of a splash at this point.
Yeah.
But I think MFers, toads are both 2 ETH, right? So like that feels like the natural resting price for these. In 6 months, 9 months down the line. I think you made an interesting point on the last second on the whole PvP, and I think this meta, this derivatives, it's PvP in 2 different ways. So one, the only way for me to win on these derivatives, which are all going to go to 0, is to mint and then dump on somebody else. Sorry, my son's home.
Yeah.
But it's also taking money away from other projects, right? So everyone who's focused on like the derivative of the day, it's taking liquidity from other projects who might have been running or at least had a little bit more attention. So it's also hurting those projects, which I think is another trend that we're absolutely seeing here this week.
Yeah.
And I'll be curious if Goblin Mania does quiet down, I'll be curious what fills that void, because clearly there's ETH on the sidelines ready to be traded every day because we're seeing the Goblins.
And sort of what I just described is because there's less bleeding going on in this versus when, for instance, we've seen some of these other mints like a Chimpers, PXN, Tiger Bob, like these higher cost to mint. And if they trickle downward, then people just spent all this ETH on one item that's going downward. It's slowly bleeding versus some of these others where you're only losing 0.02 at a time. You fire here and there. One of them hits, you keep going, you go back. And so I think there are people that have gained a decent amount of ETH in this sort of meta. And those are the types of people who maybe now they have a bankroll that they could start playing it with some of the better stuff, or they'll start moving towards the better stuff in that sort of rush to the blue chips in a way. So we'll see what happens there. I think NFT NYC is obviously a big thing on people's radars. But yeah, for me, like this has just been one of those in between periods where some people are winning heavily in this. And it'll be interesting to see because crypto itself has kind of leveled off of that panic from a few weeks back. So maybe, and this is something we've talked about before, maybe with ETH stabilizing a bit, that will help as far as people having confidence to bring money back off of the sidelines. Because there's a lot more like normies, so to speak, that have been trading this type of stuff because they don't have big bankrolls, and now they're gaining more of the bankroll, or they were tied to the goblins because they rode them all the way up, and these were sort of like influencers aren't in on these and pumping them. Influencers were hating them, so that kind of fueled the fire in a way. So that's sort of been how I've been looking at it here. What's your thoughts on Boki? Is one that kind of pumped earlier today. That's more of a legitimate project. I guess sort of more towards that like cute meta, like opposite of the goblin type of art. And this pumped earlier today. They're up to around 1 ETH floor. I believe they were 0.3, 0.4 yesterday. So what's your thoughts on this Boki movement?
Yeah, certainly. This one was an interesting one to see. So we fudded this, or I fudded this a little bit on last week's show, maybe because the high end of this set looks a lot like Doodles. It felt like a little bit of a Doodles ripoff to me.
Yeah.
What pumped this one is like I was a little shocked when I checked this one and saw it was 1.2 just a few hours ago. It looks like it may have all stemmed from this Haralabob tweet, famous in NBA Twitter, NBA gambling sphere, if anyone is familiar with that kind of corner of Twitter. But he tweeted just about 3 hours ago, you haven't lived till you've swept the floor of some random NFT product and then joined the Discord to see everyone acting like millionaires twerking. And then he posted a picture of a Boki twerking. And that corresponds right with when this run seems to have happened. So I know there's been, a lot of people with eyes on this set. It seems like more of the legit projects to have dropped in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it really, I think the trend or the theme to me that we can take away from this is all these projects who are like in the 0.3 to 0.5 range are just one catalyst away from springboarding up to 1 to 1.5 ETH. It's similar to what we saw with Wrecked Guy last week. Wrecked Guy was hanging 0.4, 0.5 post reveal, and then Snoop Dogg made his PFP, and it surged on Saturday into Sunday to like the 1.1, 1.2 range before now falling back. So I think the key to all these new projects will be, can they use that catalyst to build on that momentum, or is it just going to be, a single pump and then back down? So I think that's what we'll need to be watching here.
Yeah. And to go sort of back to that original tweet we were looking at earlier, is it seems like just NFTs are such momentum that is driving a lot of the trading behind it. So people see, oh, there was a sweep. Oh, why did 30 Bokies just get swept? And they hop on board, and then all of a sudden it starts trending, and people see it on their trackers that they are looking at for NFTs, and all of a sudden it's that FOMO rush that it can move very quickly. So that's where one thing we've talked about before is like how thin floors can be. And it's one thing I mentioned in my thread yesterday about Goblintown is just there was not a lot of listings at any point in time. It was only around like 6 to 8% most of the time. So when it's that thin, it only takes a couple people going in and dropping 20 ETH to sweep the floor, get 30, 20. It pings on the gem bot. It pings in discords that watch it, and then people see, and that's how a lot of these things start to run. That's what happened with the buy this NFT or I'll do it. Is it started popping on trending and people saw it, and why are these getting bought? Oh, these look weird. These look like something that could pump. And then all of a sudden you take that narrative and that's what kind of pushes a lot of these. So I agree with that. And I think what you're saying there, where maybe it's time to go back to looking at these lower end under 1 ETH types of mints. I saw there was a 15 mutant sweep yesterday, but we haven't really seen it as much at the higher end. And a lot of those projects have been slowly building back up. It seems like they have recently bottomed. Doodles, Azuki, both were around 10 ETH, and they've gone up to about 12, 13 again. So what's your thoughts on the higher end Bored Ape down to, say, those Azuki and Doodle range?
So I've got mixed feelings. When Bored Apes started marching this week, and we're showing the Lucky Trader board, and Bored Apes are second on the board in volume, 9,400 ETH traded, 95 sales. The floor is right back to like 94, I think, right before we started taping the show here. That's up from like the 80 range. Like clearly they're marching back to 100, and if they get back to 100, that feels like a notable floor price to me. Like it shows that
it'll get talked on Twitter and pumped that way.
Absolutely, and I feel like okay, we're back a bit. So I've been very happy to see that. I think the success of the Bored Ape product absolutely kind of sets the tone for everything in the NFT market, at least right now in the near term. And then I think they'll lead the way for the rest of the top 5 to start moving after that. But it really feels like the rest of the top 5, like they're moving a little bit. Maybe they're up 10%, but they've given up that 10 to 15% in a day so quickly, so many times over the past few weeks. It really just feels like we're chopping. To your point, I think everyone's just kind of waiting. We're all in limbo ahead of NFT NYC. I think my current theory is they're going to start building about a week before. So people are now expecting that these are going to pump during these parties at NFT NYC. Yeah. So they're going to want to front run that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some movement here. What's that, about mid-June, right around June 15th, June 16th, ahead of that. But other than that, really not too much exciting to talk about in these mid-tiers. They're up 5-10% on relatively low volume. 2,000 ETH on the week for Azuki's, 1,800 for Clone X. I don't even see Moonbirds on this list.
Yeah, they don't have a ton of volume, but they're at around 22.
Right. So yeah, they're all they're all just kind of sitting there waiting for what's next. So hopefully we get some news on those here soon.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is probably around what people are also going to be thinking. And if you're heading to NFT NYC, you might want to sort of pack your bags. No pun intended. But before you get there. So that could be one too. And if people want to get into these cool parties, they might buy into some of these. So we'll see. I think one of the big surprises of the week, positively, was this Admit one. So from G Money, put out a somewhat, still unsure of what it is all about, but it's going to be some sort of alpha pass. And there's only 1,000 of them, and the floor has been very bullish. It's been around this 15 ETH. So what's your thoughts on Admit One?
Yeah, so I think he's definitely seen the success that Kevin Rose had with Proof Collective, and to me, that's the analogy for this. This is G Money's version of Proof. He wants to create his own private group. He's kind of touting this or marketing out to Web3 enthusiast, builders, thought leaders. So kind of that higher tier collector group, and I think the initial people who were able to mint were folks who attended one of his in-person conferences. I want to say it like Bitcoin Miami, or something like
Yeah,
that.
I think like ETH Denver was one too.
Sure. So people who've already in the past kind of shown that they are, at least dedicated enough to go to these conferences and attend and, interact. I think the price action has been a bit surprising. I mean, I think it's also people just anointing this as the next Proof, and a little bit of FOMO kicks in. This came out of the gate at around 3-4 ETH, and now I think it touched 19, never quite got to 20. Now it's sitting at 16 ETH. I think this is absolutely going to set a new trend, in my opinion, for any of like the top notch, influencers, thought leaders in the NFT and Web3 space. They're going to have the opportunity to do this if they want to. I know we're going to talk about Justin Aversano and his doppelganger project probably later in the show near the end. But Justin was one of the first to do this with his Quantum Key project, which is kind of a similar line of when you hold the Quantum Key, it gives you access to mint, future art projects from Justin and the Quantum team. I think the only reason why people are paying 16 ETH for G Money's and Mint One is there is expectation that you will be able to mint something from G Money here in the near future, similar to how Proof had Grails and then Moonbirds, right? So there's absolutely an expectation for that. I think it is a little surprising that Admit One is already 16 while Quantum Keys is sitting at like 5.5. So it's already 3x. But that could just be kind of part of the different timing of when each of them launched. Also, I mean, G Money has definitely got one of the biggest followings. So this is definitely a new trend to watch. From an investment standpoint, I'm not going to short this at 16. I think this one absolutely could run on any good announcement, on any news of an airdrop. So I'm definitely watching this one pretty closely.
Yeah, I think one big piece of FUD around this one is that G Money is at least pseudo, if not full anon. And I think the big factor why people are interested in Proof and why they kind of believe in when Proof hit 100 ETH was because Kevin Rose is pretty out there and doxed. So that's been one piece of FUD I've seen with this is why are you sending this to someone who's essentially still anonymous, but we saw he was at VCon. He's been at all these events that the POAPs were from. Did you want to talk about that while you add it up, or we go back to it? But he did post on the Nate Chastain thing as well. So this was from VCon.
So this is from Miami Fashion Week, but I think your point is very well taken that he is pseudo anon, and that could be potentially a problem. And then here we are today, and he's posting a photo of himself. Of course, he's still got his punk, avatar in place of his face, but it's about as close to a doxing as like, here I am a real person. Here I am at this Miami Fashion Event week. So I kind of put the two and two together when you made your point. Maybe this is why he is doing this, and he is trying to make himself more public, more real, right? He also spoke at that conference with Punk 6529 a few days ago.
But he put up a wall, so you couldn't even see him.
Right, but I guess it's about as public as you can possibly be as a pseudo anon. So, no, it's an interesting point, and will it hold the project back? That's very possible, but it could also transition into another big item from G Money's Twitter and Nate Chastain. So for those who are not familiar, Nate Chastain was, I don't know, what was his role at OpenSea? Was it like director of operations? He had
it was project manager, I think is what they called it. I don't think he was head of operations.
Sure,
But
but a relatively small team, definitely an impactful role. And essentially, the nuts and bolts of what he was doing is OpenSea would put like 3 projects on like their front page and say
yeah,
like,
it's
these are
featured.
new projects or featured. What he was doing was buying those ahead of them being on the front page and then selling. And he made so essentially it was absolutely insider trading on the information that he had and the control he had. He only made like 18 to 20 ETH on this whole thing, but it blew up. He got fired, and now, unfortunately for Nate, the SEC and a few others are the FBI are coming after him here for essentially for wire fraud, money laundering, all tied to him basically doing insider trading at OpenSea. So I think this has made a lot of other people worried, scared about what are the other impacts for the space, for other project teams, everything.
Yeah, I think it, and it's kind of annoying in a way, but I do think they are going to sort of make a statement out of this. It's the first of these cases to really pop up, and OpenSea is the biggest name in NFT marketplaces. So I mean, if I was him, wouldn't feel too confident in this. Not sure how good of a lawyer he has. I think a lot of the items here, it's kind of uncharted territory as far as the law goes. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about doing this. I think you want to keep your eye on it, and if any sort of regulations come out of it is potentially out there. OpenSea themselves might be in some trouble with this for it coming out. Um, I'm sure they're going to have to get cracked down in some format. So it's I think this is a pretty big deal. This whole story, how it gets handled, and I don't know. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, he only got 20 ETH. Was that even worth it for 40 years in jail?" And I would guess he doesn't get the maximum sentence, but um,
Yeah,
obviously,
I
I'm
think
not a lawyer or anything.
that's why I think some people are upset about this. Is relative on the relative scale, like this isn't a ton of funds, and he was punished, right? So he was fired
Yeah,
from OpenSea.
I think they formally said he resigned, but probably pushed out.
Sure. And then people are kind of doing it. It's a lot of whataboutism. Well, what about so and so who did
Yeah,
this? And then what about the founders of these crypto exchanges who are essentially just manipulating the market, dumping on everyone? Um, I think that's a different story. This is still pretty cut and dry what he did wrong. You mentioned OpenSea being in trouble. I think a lot of folks or chatter out there is that OpenSea made the call because Nate was working or supposedly working on a
whistleblower.
rival platform,
Mm.
and that they might have been, involved in helping to bring charges on this. So who knows? But definitely, there's going to be impacts. Clearly, Web3, NFTs, crypto is now on the FBI, all these enforcement agencies'
Yeah,
radars, and they might be coming after more people.
yeah, and that they're already pretty heavily scrutinized in a lot of ways. So it's going to be interesting to watch this case unfold. There's knowing NFTs in general, there'll probably be some collections made out of this, as people will go into. And we saw the Johnny Depp had these NFTs that yesterday they ran up from like zero point 0.3 up to like over 1 ETH. I saw them at one point, and now I think they're back down to about half an ETH. But those are somewhat opportunities in short term to look at, but it's similar to these goblin derivatives where it's that diminishing returns of once people see that it was successful, then 20 others get added, and you don't know which one to choose between them. So that's just something to look out for with this Nate Chastain case. Uh, but something that popped up, figured we'd throw it out there. We'll obviously be following it. Lucky Trader, as more news comes up, we'll be adding those to our news updates. as more info comes in, but unsure. We'll see how that goes. As you said, there's plenty of other people that have done, I don't want to say worse, but have at bigger scale. Like even like Duquan has the amount of money that people have lost from the Luna stuff is way higher than this. So he's also under scrutiny. If you have Luna, you want to check your Terra wallet because you might have some Luna 2.0 dropped in there that you can claim. Figured I'd throw that out there. It's not worth as much as Luna at the top, and you aren't getting all of your money back or anything like that. But definitely check that out because there could be a decent amount in there for you. So anyway, that's more of a side note. What else? We have Art Blocks had another one of these is Art Blocks back factory drops that this was yesterday. I believe only 200 in this collection. So another one where I think at this point in time, personally, I just think 10K is too much in the current market. But the things that are thriving are much smaller counts. So talk about the Daisies, which was an Art Blocks factory drop yesterday.
Yeah, so I'm kicking myself. So I had written about this in my weekly preview article for Lucky Trader as well as the Wednesday daily post. And then for whatever reason, I just got busy and I missed this mint. It looks like it only lasted a few minutes. It was 200 at a flat 0.1. I wasn't sure. So the factory floor is below 0.1. I want to say it's like 0.05. So I thought that one was right on the edge. You know, we've seen all the PFP projects struggle at that number. So I wasn't certain, you know, how the market would react. We've had tons of flower related factory projects for anyone who's been following Art Blocks Factory for any period of time. It's a pretty common theme. But you know, this is one that it got out of the gate, it minted out fast, and then it was a 6x for anyone who minted. I don't know if this was a gas war, so if the effective price was over 0.1, but I saw secondary at 0.65 just a few hours after the mint. With that being said, it has since fallen back to earth quite a bit. Let's check in on it. I want to say it's like 0.35. Yeah, it's 0.35. So I think it's important to understand for anyone who is minting to trade these Art Blocks projects, a huge percentage of them are following the same price arc where there's a very small attention window right after the mint, and then the attention and liquidity goes away, and typically the floors drop 50% or more, or in the worst case, there's just no liquidity to buy whatever the floor is. So if anyone's looking to trade, you want to get in and get out pretty quickly. But definitely a positive sign. You know, this is like the fourth straight factory to mint out. So we're at the point where for traders, you have to pay attention to these Art Blocks mints.
Yeah. And the factory ones, like that's the important part with this, because there was a whole section of time where factories didn't mint out at all. And even when they were under 1,000 count, obviously this one there was only 200 of, so much smaller count than normal, where it's still only about a 50% holder rate on it. But yeah, I think it's the type of thing where if you watch for them and go after these ones that as you see them mint out very quickly and it's a small count, it's more likely for it to come out of it as above the mint price. So depending on what you're going for, if you're looking for the quick flips. But I think the art on this one actually came out pretty good compared to some of these others. And it's flowers. People like flower art in general. I guess this brings me to another point where we haven't really talked about much, but there's this. We talked a little about the AI Nightbirds last week, but there's sort of a new AI generated art that is starting to come back a little bit here. That's why we were thinking about Art Blocks. There's also like brain drop stuff. Do you think that that's where people got drawn to this? There's the other AI stuff is mostly just like derivatives of like goblins right now, but do you think there's anything to generative art potentially making a comeback?
Uh, it's possible. I mean, I think the reason why people like those AI moonbirds or nightbirds with their new name is the art was cool. And I think the real test this weekend will be Doppelganger, which is
Yeah.
Eversano's AI photo art project. But before we get there, a couple other thoughts on art blocks. So one, like, is art blocks back or not? Which was like one of our leading questions. I'm definitely not ready to say it's back. So Color Space was last week's curated drop. Its floor was 0.3. So this Factory Daisies project went 2x above the last curated project. And really, the liquidity on Tabor Roback's Color Space has really been pretty poor since the first day. So I don't think that's a great sign. But we have another big test on Friday. So Assorted Positivity from Steganon. Steganon did
Yeah,
Autology,
I remember that one.
which only holds a 0.22 floor, but people seem to like the art previews for Assorted Positivity quite a bit. And 57 have already been minted because he allowed some of his curated owners to mint early, which is also going to reduce the supply. So now there's only about 350 of these. And we know in these Dutch auctions that once 50 or 100 start going, that's when the FOMO kicks in and everyone starts to hit that mint button. So this one's going to
And
be
people
interesting
won't
to watch.
know. People won't know that there were already 50. They'll hop on at, um, the start of this, and they'll be like, "Oh wow, 50 are already minted," and you just won't know that it already started that way. I do kind of like some of these,
Mhm.
the spherical nature in the center there with the background. I was having this conversation when I was camping last weekend, actually, with someone who was saying that the human eye, and this is a little way more philosophical, but the human eye is somewhat more attracted to spheres as a
Hmm.
shape versus some other shapes. So I could see people liking the art of this because of the sphere in front, and then it's got like the background that's sort of like a splash art off of the sphere. Um, for those who might just be listening, and now that I'm describing artwork, it feels like a few months back, but yeah, I think this one I could see people wanting, and wanting to be a part of. So this starts tomorrow. That's 1 Eastern, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that one I could see. I'll probably look out for, because I don't want to say like some people are burnt out by it. I don't want to say I'm not burnt out by it, but I'm just over trying to chase these like insert blank town, uh, WTF and goblins, and I want to start looking at like better looking stuff that actually makes sense
Yeah,
to want.
it's much more satisfying minting art blocks than it is to mint 10, Goblin Burger derivatives,
Yeah.
which is the 10th, free mint of the week. Back to your alpha on spheres, I want to call this out. I think this is real art critic alpha from Lou Dog
Yeah.
on the show today. So the Horo project, I followed closely. It was factory from last week. There were, I'd say like 10 to 20% of those images that had spheres in them that carried a 2.5x premium
Yeah.
to the floor. So there's your alpha for Assorted Positivity. Look out for the
Well,
spheres. They have a good shot to carry a premium because the human eye likes to see those spheres.
I mean, look at there's 5 shown on the screen right now, and if you were to buy one, would you buy either of the 2 on the right? Like, the one that pops to me is the green one, at least, that one has a sphere, and that's what made me think of it, was because that one popped to me. It has somewhat of a 3D effect in this case as well. So let's talk about the doppelgangers, because that is another high end artist, uh, Justin Eversano, and he is partnering up with Quantum NFT for those holders. This is also going to be tomorrow. And I had done the post for Lucky Trader on this one, and they're basically, I don't want to say reimagining, but they're, I forget how it's worded. It's restructuring the twin flames, and it's through code. So it's generating new artwork, and this Kim uh, Ansendorf, I think that's how you pronounce it, is created the code for it. So what's your thoughts here? Because this is taking a project that has over 100 ETH floor, not very liquid, is Twin Flames, but considered very high end. It's similar to say like the where the Vans go. So what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, it is so Twin Flames from Justin Aversano, for those who aren't familiar, is the #1 photo NFT project in the world out there on the market right now. So at peak, it held a 200 ETH floor. I think it's back down to like 115, 120 ETH right now. But it is
Only.
yeah, it is by far #1. That's 2x what Drifter Shoots and Where My Vans Go are holding right now. So I think Justin is the clear #1. That's a collection of 100 photos. So this is 10x the supply. It's 1,000. It is based on the Twin Flames work. As I understand it from the video here, it's outtakes. And then to your point, they've got artists applying AI code to glitch or add these like glitched rectangles on top of those Twin Flames photos. So this is an interesting one to me. We've seen other big name artists like Kath Samard and her Metascapes project, launch, the AI version of their photos, and they haven't really, the market hasn't really liked them that much, just to be quite blunt. But this is Justin. He's #1. At 50% of the market cap for Twin Flames, this would be holding like a 6 ETH floor. Which the reason I bring that up is to be able to mint one of these, you have to hold the quantum key, which have caught some trading here this week, and currently hold a 5.6 ETH floor price. And I think they're up from like the three range. But this is not just like a 1-for-1 mint. Those who hold the quantum keys will be able to mint more of these drops in the future. So I think the play here, if you're interested in Doppelganger, is to buy the key, buy it now, and then potentially hold. But if you're purely interested in Doppelganger work, then probably the sharper play would be to wait and then see if there's any type of a dip on secondary. But some of his previous products have gone to 12, 22 ETH floors. So others hold a 3. So not really sure how the market's going to value this one. But I think it will be a really strong indicator of how much ETH is out there right now for art and art-related projects versus derivative of the day.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that he has a massive following of people who want to be a part. One thing that I would mention is when you have a 6 ETH floor in the quantum NFT, which means people are expecting the floor of this to be pretty high. If you consider it as how much more than quantum was before, around 3 ETH or so. The timepiece that he did only has a floor of around half an ETH. It's very thin. There's a lot less of them, and it's connected to time, so it's a little different. But personally, I don't know. It's tough for me because I think a move is to buy the dip of quantum for the next one of these. I think it might be too late. We'll see. Like there might be some sort of rare lotto that comes out. It might not even be a rarity lotto. It might be like I don't know what you would call it, like a visual lotto. Certain ones that people just like the look of better or are attached to the higher end Twin Flames. So I think it'll be interesting to watch this. Is this the first, at least the first big one from Quantum Art? It would be considered like a Genesis collection?
No, they definitely have had prior drops that would be closer to Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is just kind of the next one in the line, which could be, a negative factor against this one. It's just
Yep.
another project. So there's definitely pros and cons to this one. But my message to everyone who's out there complaining about all the junk that gets minted every day. Well, we've got art blocks minting a few days a week, and now we've got one of the biggest names in photo NFTs minting. So if you want to see more of that, then support it. Go buy it, and don't just get on Twitter and complain every day about how goblins are running. So I think this market is still small enough that all the individual players can impact it. So that's my message to all the naysayers out there.
Yeah. And I think as I was mentioning before, like some of the higher end projects have been seeing decent volume and support. They haven't been dipping all too far. So we might have found the bottom in some of these projects. There's obviously still upside in a lot of different projects that haven't really boosted too hard yet. But I've been sort of trying to watch that mid tier. Not a lot of movement because the one that broke through was Goblintown. Um, as you can see on here, it's all sort of the big name stuff. Yeah, Nightbirds is kind of a surprise to me to be up there, but I guess like it's still within that week where they had a lot of movement. But outside of that, like it's all kind of the same stuff. That Genesis one is in there as well, and Wreck Guy's one that I know you're pretty big on. I've been looking at them, and it's just sort of everything I keep talking about. Of it's new, it still hasn't ran too high yet. It only takes a couple people talking about it on Twitter or another, say, airdrop or something that gets announced by the team to have it move again. We've already seen it get over one. That shows some support that people were willing to buy there in the past. So um, I don't know. It's kind of tough in this market, but I think I'd bet on something like Wrecked Guy over. There's Chimpers and Tiger Bob, which started higher and have come down. It's almost like when that happens, people just have a sour taste in their mouth and won't buy back into it. But we saw Cool Cats run from low threes over 4 ETH. World of Women, I think, got under 4 and then bounced back up. So some of these mid-range project people are re-entering into. So it's just something to track ahead of the weekend here. Is there anything else going into this weekend that you had your eyes on?
No, I think we covered it, Lou. I think the art blocks tomorrow is the primary one on my radar. And then the doppelganger. I'll pull up the Lucky Trader schedule here real quick just to see if anything else pops up. We've got the Quirklings airdrop this evening,
Yeah,
and
if you
then
have quirkies.
also the liquidity grab where they're doing the half airdrop, half mint. So that one will be interesting. And then that's really it on my radar.
Yeah, and there is that Top Shot pack, which we don't really talk about Top Shot much here, but I will say they have been doing a lot recently. They have been popping up on the updates. They added bids. They added their new version of the collector score, the Top Shot score. They've obviously like playoffs are here and they're doing stuff for that. This series is coming to a close soon, so a lot's been going on in the Top Shot streets. I think at some point we might end up talking about Flow NFTs on here as they start popping up more. Solana was down yesterday, and there were some jokes. I saw Andy was talking about that Flow NFTs almost caught Solana in daily volume yesterday, but not too much to talk about over there yet. But just something that I've been noticing more. They are doing a lot of stuff. I'm not sure if they're doing anything for NFT NYC, but that's pretty much what the news is right now. Is when things are popping up. And Moonbirds yesterday came out with their party is going to have Tame Impala and David Blaine of note. And then Doodles came out with their information on it, where For Doodles, I thought something that was kind of cool is if you have a duplicator, you'll be able to go to those events. You don't need the full on Doodle. So who knows? I might end up buying a duplicator here in the next couple of weeks, depending on if I want to go to that event. But yeah, mostly it seems like the bigger name projects are waiting to give information out there. Doodles, the whole duplicator reveal, I think is on the 21st. So that's sort of what I'm looking at these days, and nothing else. Everything else is just sort of when people pop up and say, "Hey, this thing's minting." Sometimes I'll hop into those, and just be careful out there of links that you're clicking. I guess is how I'd word it. The way that I've been doing these mints is I never use the website. So contract minting is your friend. It's less likely for you to click on some random URL that's wrong. If you find the contract, you can go directly to that on Etherscan. So that's how I'd say if you're participating in those mints, use the contract, and generally don't mint from your phone as well. So just be safe out there. There's a lot going on. We do have some information on how to mint from contract on our website for Lucky Trader. But besides that, yeah, just looking into this weekend, sort of just sitting around and waiting to make moves on stuff. Once I see a little more indication that there is interest from people. So that's sort of how I've been attacking it. Any last thoughts?
Lou, I think you nailed it. Everyone, please be careful out there. I think part of this new free mint meta is no one's doing any research on anything, right?
Yeah.
And that's where people get burned when your guard gets let down. So pay attention, do your due diligence, take the right steps, right? Don't lose your ETH and your NFTs chasing the 20th free goblin mint of the weekend. But other than that, it's going to be some fairly open runway. We saw some movement last weekend. I feel like the whole week's been off with the holiday. Typically Tuesdays are slow. Wednesday was a slower day. So I'm hoping that we'll start to see a little momentum in some of the projects here this weekend, but we'll see. We'll definitely be watching it.
Yeah. Goblin trickle down effect. Let's see if that is real. So thanks for stopping by, everyone, and see Keenan in the chat there. Thanks for listening to us today, and we'll see you guys Monday.